All right, let's have the Liberation Train pull in to the station of chaos. It's the Business on Purpose podcast. Scott Beebe, your host. I mentioned on the last episode, and I really want you to go back and listen to it if you have not already. The process called you out. It's an important episode because it speaks to the priority of building, implementing, holding to, and repeating process over and over and over again because there's so much inherent value to it. Process actually lays the groundwork for human relationship. When process is laid down, it makes other things more predictable so that we can spend more time focusing on the human relationship. Within that, I've realized recently, and I mentioned it a little bit in the last podcast, when I'm talking about vision story, mission statement, unique core value set, systems, processes, hiring process, team meeting structures, non-negotiable weekly schedules, when we're talking about those things, something has hit me recently, and I would say in the last couple of months, that what we're doing is we're speaking a language. So if I came into you and said, "Hola, ¿cómo estás?" and you responded with, "Muy bien, ¿y tú?" Well, for those of you who know that, that's Spanish. For those of you who don't know Spanish, have never heard Spanish, you're slightly confused because it's a different language. Now, if you were to ask me, Scott, do you know Spanish? My response to you would be no. I know some words in Spanish, but I don't know Spanish. And part of knowing Spanish is not only the volume of words, but actually living with the language every single day. Embedding the language into day-to-day practice. When you stop at the gas station and fuel up, are you using Spanish? When you sit down at the dinner table and go over highs and lows from the day, are you using Spanish? That's knowing the language. But merely knowing a couple of words, hello, hola, and walking through those words, that's not knowing the language. Merely knowing the words vision story, mission statement, unique core values, systems, processes, weekly team meetings, 12-week plans, etc. Those are just knowing the words. But speaking the language is to actually embed them and do them every single day. At the time of this podcast, I've just spent the morning with 3 different heroic small business owners who have all within the last few months embraced the language. They've got the language. The language they work with is language they speak about. When they get interviewed, they start the interviews with their mission statement. And not in some corny, kooky, crazy way. When they get together with their team meetings, they talk to their teams immediately before anything else about their mission and their unique core values. When they hold training events, they open it with their vision story. When they sit down with vendors and potential new clients, they talk about their vision story. That's speaking the language. That's knowing the language. There are a lot of you who are small business owners who know the words, but you're not using the language. You're not fluent in the language. And when you get fluent in the language, that's where liberation begins to take place. But it takes a while to get there. So I can teach you a couple of words of the heroic small business owner. Vision story, mission statement, unique core values. I can teach you those words. But to embed them within the fluency of your language day to day, that takes time and repetition. Time and repetition. Time and repetition. So I can write those words down for you. But not until you get to the point where you're actually face-to-face in a situation where you're standing in a Mexican restaurant in Mexico City. There is no English language on the menu, and you can, with great fluency, work through that menu. That's when you begin to know the language. As a heroic small business owner, one of my greatest desires is that you know the language. And how do we know you know the language? Is because you're using the language. And how do we know you're using the language? Is you show up every day with great repetition. Great repetition is you've not only got it that you're repeating it, but you've got it written down. Write the vision down so that those who read it may run. Well, Scott, but you know, this is something we just do all day. Write it down. Well, Scott, this process, our people know it. They know it. But what happens if they're not here? Well, Scott, they're going to be. What happens if they're not? Write it down. Write it down. That's part of the advanced set of the language. How are they supposed to know the language? Write it down. How are they supposed to embrace the language? Repeatedly go over it, over and over and over and over and over again. And when you do that, you are creating a culture based on the language of the heroic small business owner. Man, it's exciting to hear it. That's why I wanted to share it with you. mybusinessonpurpose.com/vision. 4 steps to businessfreedom.com. We'll see you next time right here on the Business on Purpose podcast.